How many of you knew that song and you were sort of thinking the words while she was playing? More precious than silver, more costly than gold, more beautiful than diamonds, Jesus Christ. Well, we're continuing in our study of Hell Month at First Baptist, and we're in Luke chapter 16, verse 19. I invite you to turn there. One day the preacher was preaching and all the folks were sort of nodding off, and he decided he'd do something to get their attention, so he just yelled out as loud as he could. He said, "If anybody here wants to go to hell, let him stand up." Well, right in the middle of that, let him stand up, a lady woke up and she jumped to her feet and she looked around. She said, "Preacher, I don't know what you said, but you and me are the only ones standing." Luke 16, verse 19. We don't want anybody to go there, do we? All right. There was a rich man who was dressed in purple and fine linen and lived in luxury every day. At his gate was laid a beggar named Lazarus, covered with sores and longing to eat what fell from the rich man's table. Even the dogs came and licked his sores. The time came when the beggar died and the angels carried him to Abraham's side. The rich man also died and was buried. In hell, where he was in torment, he looked up and saw Abraham far away with Lazarus by his side. So he called to him, "Father Abraham, have pity on me and send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, because I am in agony in this fire." But Abraham replied, "Son, remember that in your lifetime you received your good things, while Lazarus received bad things. But now he is comforted here, and you are in agony. And besides this, between us and you a great chasm has been fixed, so that those who want to go from here to you cannot, nor can anyone cross over from there to us." He answered, "Then I beg you, Father, send Lazarus to my father's house, for I have 5 brothers. Let him warn them, so that they will not also come to this place of torment." Abraham replied, "They have Moses and the prophets. Let them listen to them." "No, Father Abraham," he said, "but if someone from the dead goes to them, they will repent." He said to them, "If they do not listen to Moses and the prophets, they will not be convinced, even if someone rises from the dead." Today we're talking about another word that the Bible uses for hell. We looked at the Valley of Hinnom, or Gehenna, that awful place where they burn dead animals and criminals, that in order to keep them from polluting the place, they would burn them continually. It was just a burning garbage dump. And that's really the basic word for hell. This other word, and we looked at also the word Tartarus, which was in 1 Peter, looked at that last week. Today we're looking at the word Hades. This word is also translated hell. But I want you to go back with me and look at verse 19. There was a rich man. Now this is not a parable. This is a true story. You say, how do you know? Because parables don't name names. A parable is an earthly story with a heavenly meaning. But in this little discourse, this little study right here, we see that names are mentioned. Now we've all heard, or a lot of us probably have heard, that the rich man's name was Dives. You ever heard that? Dives. And I said, all right, now I've heard that, but I don't see it in the text. So what's going on here? So I did a little research, and I found out that the Latin word for rich man is Dives. So we really don't have his name. But we do have a man named Lazarus. You remember the Old Testament man named Eleazar? He was Abraham's servant. Not Abraham's servant. One of those other dudes. It was Abraham. Isaac's servant. Thank you. Was it Isaac? No. Abraham's servant. Abraham's servant Eleazar, he said, "Now, I want you to go back to where we came from and find a son for find a wife for my son Isaac." Okay, there we go. And he said, okay. Eleazar is that servant. His name means whom God has helped. That's a pretty good name, isn't it? So on the one hand, you have a rich man. On the other hand, you have a very poor man. Let's compare these two guys. The wealthy man, it says he was a rich man. He just kept on abounding. Everything he did just turned to gold. You know anybody like that? Just seems like everything they do just prospers. Who was dressed in purple and fine linen. He just kept putting it on. He was a show-off. He wanted everybody to know that he had money. Not only was he rich, he wanted people to know that he was rich. Do we need the air on, anybody? I see a lot of fanning. Would anybody be offended if I turn the air conditioning on? All right. Listen while I walk. All right. And he kept on clothing himself in a fabric colored with purple dye, a garment made from purple cloth, and a species of Egyptian flax. He really knew how to put on the best clothing. One of our children for Christmas said that they wanted some nice sheets for Christmas. Now, I don't know anything about this. Some of y'all may. But the higher the thread count, the better the sheets. Is that correct? And when we were buying these sheets, the lady that sold them to us said, yes, it's true. She said, in fact, we've got a really nice set of linens. And she said, when I take those off and put the others on while I'm washing the good ones, my husband can tell the difference. He said, what's wrong? It's kind of scratchy. Well, for Christmas, one child got the high thread count. The other one got some SpongeBob sheets. Now, this must have been a very low thread count, because when I put those on the bed for Ashley, I'm like, man, it's like sandpaper. So the wealthy people wear the nice stuff. The poor people have to wear the inexpensive stuff. So he wanted everybody to know. And it said, and he lived in luxury every day. He just had money coming out his ears. On the other hand, we see the needy man, Lazarus, whom God helps. At his gate was laid a beggar named Lazarus. Now, this man was so disgusting, nobody wanted to touch him. We're going to find out just how disgusting he was in just a minute. I warned our Sunday school class this morning that it gets pretty graphic. So what they would do with him, they would just literally throw him at this gate. They didn't want to even touch him, but since they had to, they just sort of cast him down at the gate of the rich man. This man was so poor, all he did was beg for money. He became a fixture in front of the rich man's house. It says he was covered with sores. You ever gotten a cut on your hand or leg and didn't take care of it? First it became red. If you still didn't deal with it, what else began to happen? Began to get filled with pus. So here's this man, he's covered. Remember Job in the Old Testament, how everybody was just sort of grossed out by him? He was scraping his sores, his boils with pieces of broken pottery. That's how this man Lazarus was. He was just disgusting. All right, what did he want? And longing to eat what fell from the rich man's table. He wanted to have just a little bit of what was falling off. This rich man was eating a banquet every time he sat down. I mean, he had just a table overflowing with food. But he didn't get any food. Here's what happened. Even the dogs came and licked his sores. Not only did he not get to eat the good food that came from the rich man's table, he was feeding others. The dogs, the impure ones, the awful ones would come and lick the sores from his body. You say, how awful, how unfair, how terrible that one has so much and the other has so little. But now we're going to find out that the inhabitants of hell have discovered 4 things that we need to know. Jesse Duplantis preached a message years ago, what in hell do you want? Now, I didn't want to put that on a bulletin, but what in hell should we want? What are some things that hell has that we need? Number 1, they have an understanding of forever. The time came when the beggar died. That hour came. Now, I wonder what he died from. Did he die from too much food? Or did he starve to death? He starved to death. And the angels carried him to Abraham's side. All right? In the Old Testament,